Welcome back to this Christmas Eve edition of The Price of Business. Delighted to be with you, talking to you about you and your business, bringing you politically incorrect tunes to celebrate the holiday season. All right, I got John Gizzi here. He's with the Human Events newspaper. We've got Human Events on the program twice today, which is awesome. I love Human Events. One of the very first conservative publications I ever got exposed to back in the 1980s when I was a young man in college was Human Events, and back then there weren't a whole lot of conservative media, and it was extremely important to me and in my understanding of liberty, and delighted to have John on the program. John is the senior White House correspondent. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, and enjoy having you on too. Real quickly, how long have you been covering the White House?
Well, I've been covering the White House for 10 years. I've been with Human Events 33 years.
Wow, so you've been around for a little bit. And in fact, you and I talked before about our mutual college experiences.
Yes, that's right. We did have a nice conversation.
That's right. And Human Events right there. I tell you, way before any of the ones you've heard of these days, with the exception of maybe National Review, Human Events was right there proclaiming liberty way before it was cool. And so I'm delighted to have you back on again. John, you've been doing the White House for 10 years, and we talked with one of your colleagues about the Conservative of the Year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in our segment. But I want to talk a little bit about what it's like covering the White House under Barack Obama versus the Bush administration.
Well, obviously the Obama administration has its favorites at the White House that it calls on regularly, and certainly I've been called on by the two press secretaries, Robert Gibbs and Jay Carney, but it's not at all like the Bush administration. The other thing is that whereas the press briefings under President Bush's four press secretaries were lively events, sometimes confrontational, it seems that the Obama press briefings are always confrontational.
Always.
And let me say that while some of the national media certainly likes the Obama administration, some say has a romantic attachment, the working reporters are a bit detached over there. It's hard sometimes to get news from those briefings.
Okay, so when you say they're detached, what do you mean by that? I know what detachment means, but in this context.
Well, in the sense that even people who had strong disagreements with the Bush administration, notably David Gregory, who was then the NBC White House correspondent, now moving over to host Meet the Press, he had a very good relationship with the Bush press secretary he worked with, notably the late Tony Snow. I don't know anyone who has a close relationship with the press office in the Obama administration.
Really? Including those who are more liberal in their perspective?
Yes.
That's interesting. And how would you explain that?
Well, I don't think they've really cultivated those of us in the working press. That really the way the Bush team did. And another thing, too, is that this is an administration which clearly does not like the give and take of press briefings.
Right.
President Obama started off by having nightly primetime news conferences once a month. He abandoned the idea very quickly in 2009, and now he does it very sporadically.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me ask you, is there a sense maybe of entitlement when it comes to media coverage in the White House because they know the vast majority of media is liberal? Why bother cultivating those relationships? You really don't have to.
Well, you said it, not me. I would just simply say that if you don't have your allies in the press, you're going to have enemies, and you don't want it, because when people who were formerly your friends turn on you, that's going to be a bit of a problem, frankly.
Yeah, no question about it. How many people are typically at a White House press conference, in terms of members of the media?
About 40 usually. And always in a second term, you'll find more and more empty seats there. Less people tend to cover it. This was true under past administrations. It was certainly true under George W. Bush.
And that's because of the fact that really that lame duck problem begins to settle in.
Exactly. It's very symbolic of that.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm assuming that there's seating order priority based on a little bit on seniority, but is it also based on the media?
Well, also the television press and the senior publications, notably the New York Times, the Washington Post, all sit in the first two rows. After that, you have publications such as Human Events and other news services that come, some of the foreign press, and it works its way back through the rows. But always remember, the first two go to television, National Public Radio, and to some of the senior and very durable press.
There you go. Again, it's John Gizzi. He's with Human Events, humanevents.com. John Gizzi is a senior White House correspondent. He's been on the program before. I guarantee you we're going to work at getting him back on again. I really appreciate having you on and giving us this unique perspective. It's kind of an interesting story that I think a lot of people have always wondered how that looks. You know, whenever they do press conferences, they do just the shortest view of the person who's asking the question, and the whole culture of that, the whole nuance of that, you really don't get that. So I'm glad you were able to impart some of that to us.
My pleasure, and I expect to be there a lot more, and I think you're going to see more interest in looking at the administration from the seating of White House reporters, simply because look what's coming up in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
Fiscal cliff, gun control, and then dealing with immigration. These are all red meat issues. Certainly the fiscal cliff is, because now the House essentially said to the president, back to you, to see if he will make the cuts that are needed to avoid this.
Yeah, the House tried. I'll give them that much. I'm not a Boehner fan, but he sure tried, and apparently the White House wants to go over the cliff. That's my opinion. John, again, John Gizzi, he's been on before. You can expect him on again. He's with humanevents.com, senior White House correspondent. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a Merry Christmas, by the way. All right. I hope all of you have a Merry Christmas and a great holiday season. And we're getting ready for a new year, which we'll be talking about later on this week, right here on The Price of Business.